Hello, good evening. I know what you're going to say. Probably the same thing as I would say is that why didn't it happen tonight? Bring them home now. That's what the title of the program is tonight, and I would have doubled that up and really said, you know, how disappointed I was that it didn't happen. But is it going to happen, or are they playing games again with us? But the hostages are the ones that really count, are they not? You know, I mean, every life matters, every life counts, don't get me wrong. But we've waited long enough for the hostages to be repatriated to their people. And the thing is that why it hasn't happened under law, everybody's been against Israel because of the war in Gaza and everything, but they don't want to deal with the fact that it's illegal, is it not, to keep hostages, ordinary citizens, you know, they weren't combatants at all. But anyway, Tim, I'm sure you've been watching as well. We've only just got together just now because we've both gone our separate ways during the day. But what's your opinion on what's happening?
Yeah, I'm with you. They're only releasing 3, I think, at the beginning of when the deal starts, the ceasefire starts, which is on the 19th, if I'm correct. And it's unfolding as we speak. And maybe you're listening to it as we speak as well, so you may be able to update us.
Yes, I'm keeping an ear on it as well, because in case there is anything else that comes to light. But we've got an outline of what the progress is supposed to be, and we'll be going into that. We've also got a special interview with Simon Barrett, which you just finished doing just a few minutes ago. So we want to get on to that as well, because Simon Barrett is our Middle East correspondent for Revelation TV. And I want to say, we spoke about this morning, you know, how Israel, all the way going back to the beginning, and in fact, I'm looking at Genesis chapter 28 right now, just before, as I sat down, Tim. And I noticed how Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said, "You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan." And this goes all the way through chapter 28 of Genesis, and there's a few really poignant points here, but again it's reiterated in verse 13. "And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac, and the land on which you lie, I will give it to you and your descendants." Because Jacob was having the dream with the ladder, you know, up to heaven. And so that was something special. But again, God spoke very clearly about not making intermarriage with those who are of a different faith. And it's not just because they're not of the Abrahamic faith as such, like Isaac was, but because they were Ishmael's side, went pretty much into another faith of the moon god, as we know it today to be, you know,
and this is
Muslim faith.
Allah. No, this is the root of the issue.
Yeah,
and so really, there is no ceasefire. A real ceasefire. Well, there's a ceasefire, but there's no real peace when you have, folk out there like Hamas, who are supposed to be one party of this deal, who want to wipe out Israel, and it's in their charter.
Yeah.
So that's just, of course, we want the hostages home, but ultimately, by the way, I'm not a negotiator. Ultimately, we'll want Hamas wiped out.
Yeah. One of the things I'm going to say straight away, because it stood out a mile to me, I'm looking at them now, just as the program's going out on Sky. I can see that these men are well dressed. They don't look as if they're starving in any way whatsoever. They're very strong and persistent and celebrating, and also still shouting. And the other thing that I want to point out as well is that there seems to be such, too much support, I would say, for Hamas. Indirectly.
Correct.
And directly.
So we showed, didn't we, with this morning, this interview with just a typical Gazan lady who was in Egypt at the time. She was quite naturally speaking about how much she admired Hamas and how much she hated the Jews.
Yeah.
Wherever they were, European, Yeah, I think it's worth showing.
Well, let them find it because we showed it this morning.
European, Iraqi, Israeli, didn't matter to her.
Yeah.
It's all Jews.
Yeah, it really spoke. She didn't realize she was speaking to a Jew at that time.
That's right.
Until he said, you know, I'm Jewish. Oh, she went. Yeah. But we'll show that in a minute. But the thing is that we're talking about, there's always, they come straight out, there's something like 30, 40,000 deaths in Gaza, but they never say how many of those were Hamas soldiers. Okay?
Yeah, you have to work hard to get it out of even the BBC
it never comes
presenters.
out.
But it's sort of, you have to eke it out, and it's apparently around 17,000.
Yeah.
But that's a significant proportion.
Yeah. Well, let's show that. This that we showed this morning. This is a lady who was actually, I suppose, duped into really sharing what was on her heart. And I think you'll get a proper understanding of why I think there's never going to be peace, because we know Hamas, and according to Gordon's book, this particular book talks about the actual intent of the enemy there, of Hamas actually saying, you know, there never will be peace. They don't want peace, so, you know, it's something you should look at. But let's have a look at what this particular lady said this morning.
Since the beginning of the war, I've been receiving countless DMs on my Instagram from Gazans asking for help. And my first reaction has been, call me. You see, I want to know what people there are thinking, how they feel about the war. The thing is, none of these Gazans have ever called me. Until...
This is Jacob.
Can we talk about your situation? What is your situation?
And in April, I decided to go to Egypt with my family. In the process, they not allowed to take my family and husband with me.
Where did you learn to speak such good English?
I studied from Quds Open University.
What was the life in Gaza before the war?
All people in Gaza are happy, and we live in beautiful home. We wear beautiful clothes. We eat beautiful foods. Everything was amazing. We want to recover our previous life.
October 7 is good or bad? Sabba October.
For me, I said it's good, and they are very courage. Give their life for Gaza and for us and for Jerusalem.
How can we free Palestine?
We can free Palestine by what did on 7th of October.
For you, are you happy with October 7? It's good for you?
Yes, I become proud of 7th October. I celebrate in 7th October, and we're proud of them. Yes, this is the truth.
يعني إن شاء الله كله رزة شهيد.
إن شاء الله.
Wow.
Hamas, for me, I love مقاومة. I respect Noah. He fight in the last breath to kill Israel and occupation. Give Gaza a lot.
Of course. And Hania also.
And
Hania very good.
And Hania, I'm very sad when they killed them.
Haram that they haram. How do you feel about Yahudi? Do you like Yahudi or?
Of course no. Why? They killed our children. They stole our dreams. They demolished all our dreams and our house.
Kulu Yahudi, even Iraqi Yahudi, European Yahudi, Kulu Yahudi.
Yeah, and in our Quran, Allah told us don't respect the contact between Yahudi.
Yahudi is bad.
What?
Not good.
Yeah.
You love Hamas. Like Hamas is good.
Yeah. I love all Palestinian people. Hamas, Fatah, I love them all.
In the back of my head, I'm thinking, how does she not know I'm Israeli? These questions were so on the nose. I honestly didn't think this was going to go on for so long. So I made a choice to tell her who I was.
أنا مش عربي. أنا يهودي إسرائيلي.
أنت يهودي؟ جد؟
إسرائيلي.
I am shocked.
Yeah, I know you're shocked. You want to have peace with me, or you want to kill me?
No, you.
But you say you love Hamas.
Please, no, I love all people in Gaza, I said.
You love Hamas. Hamas is good.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
How can you be okay with Hamas?
Really, I said that because I think you love Hamas.
I don't believe you.
Look. You kill our children.
You also kill our children.
But when 7th October happened, I didn't like it. I really, honestly, I become proud of 7th October. I celebrate in 7th October. No, I am a woman. I love peace. I love all people. I respect all religions.
Yehudi is bad, not good.
Yeah, all the people in Gaza now don't want Hamas control Gaza. We're proud of them as Muqawama, as they make sometime.
You're proud of Sinwar.
Guys.
You're proud of Ismail Haniya.
Ismail Haniya is good.
They destroy your country. They destroy your people. They destroy your life. Sinwar is good. Sinwar destroy your life. Sinwar is bad. But we cannot have salam if you like Sinwar. Sinwar want to kill me, want to kill my grandma, want to kill my Israel is not going anywhere. Israel will stay here, inshallah, forever.
Wait.
The issue that I'm pointing to in this video is bigger than me and this lady from Gaza. It's a failure at the hands of the UN and Palestinian leadership to push their people away from radical Islamic terrorism. Arab supremacy is a real issue in the Middle East. We see it everywhere we go, from Syrian Arabs massacring Kurds, to Iraqi Arab Muslims massacring Mandeans, to Egyptian Arab Muslims massacring Copts, to Palestinians massacring Jews. I want to clarify, even though this lady wants to see me dead, I don't hate her. She grew up with a cancerous ideology, and we Jews have good reason to believe that most Palestinians hold these exact same viewpoints.
Howard.
It's quite revealing, is it not? A social media influencer there, Israeli. And I think also, I just want to reiterate some of the things which are in the Genesis book as well, with regards to how God wants to safeguard Israel as well, and also promises to bring Israel back to the land. Says there in verse 15 of chapter 28, "Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Then Jacob woke up from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place." And he did not know it at the time, but how awesome is that, you know? And there are many, many scriptures. I know most of our viewers over the years will have known them inside out, but it's just good to, you know, come back to history and to times that really emphasize that Israel, the Jewish people, have the right to that land, and they should not be sharing it. They've already given so much away, and there's never going to be peace. Not until Isaiah chapter 17, the prophecy there, where it talks about Arab and Jew and Egyptian will all come together and worship the true God Yahweh at a time still yet to be fulfilled in the future.
That promise, which we see repeated throughout the scriptures, has another side to it, and that is the enemy of God does not want it to be fulfilled. So we say, oh, how can you do a deal with Hamas? It's what's behind Hamas, which is this hatred of God and his promises. Mm-hmm. That's the root issue.
And their animosity and hatred towards the Jewish people. And yet, the irony is, when you go back to Ishmael, they are, if you like, not cousins, they're almost brothers through the father Abraham, you know?
And Ishmael comes out fairly well out of that story. I mean, of course, he was sort of ribbing Isaac and, you know, and bullying him, and Sarah wasn't happy about that. But, you know, that poor kid, you know, was exiled along with his mum.
But what happened, the angel of the Lord appeared in the desert on their way when they were about to expire, and hit the rock, and the rock produced water. And the promises that the angel of the Lord actually gave Ishmael and his mother Hagar was incredible. You will become mighty kingdoms, you know, and they have indeed. And in fact, they own most of the land out there. That's the irony. You know, when you have a look at the landmass.
If Israel can make peace without, as it were, conceding this land that the Lord has given them, that's the difficult balancing act they have. And to concede a Palestinian state to people that want to destroy you, that doesn't seem to be the smartest move.
Right. Well, the interview that you did just before the programme with you know, Simon Barrett is actually now ready to play. So, I beg your pardon?
Quite ready.
Oh, no, President Biden's ready. Okay. Let's have a look at this next one.
Good afternoon. It's a very good afternoon, because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza will begin. And the innocent people can have a greater access to these vital supplies. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get Phase 2, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war. There are a number of details to negotiate to move from Phase 1 to Phase 2, but the plan says if negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue as long as the negotiations continue. I've spoken to the Emir of Kuwait and the President of Egypt, and we have pledged to make sure the negotiations will keep moving forward for as long as it takes. Then, when Phase 2 begins, there will be an exchange for release of the remaining living hostages, including male soldiers, and all remaining Israeli forces will be withdrawn from Gaza, and the temporary ceasefire will become permanent. And finally, Phase 3, any final remains of hostages who have been killed will be returned to their families, and a major reconstruction plan for Gaza will begin. This is the ceasefire agreement I introduced last spring. Today, Hamas and Israel have agreed to that ceasefire agreement and the whole ending the war. You know, those of you who have followed the negotiations can attest, the road to this deal has not been easy. I've worked in foreign policy for decades. This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced. And we reached this point because of the pressure that Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. Hamas's longtime leader, Sinwar, was killed. Hamas's strongest supporter, Iran, launched attacks on Israel. And those attacks failed after my administration organized a coalition of nations to stop them. And after I ordered the U.S. ships and planes to come to Israel's defense, we also shaped Israel's strong and calibrated response, destroying Iran's air defenses, but avoiding an escalatory cycle of an all-out war. The United States also organized a coalition of 20 countries to stand up to attacks by the Houthis, including their missile attacks in Israel. Then, Hezbollah, another of Hamas's strongest backers, was significantly weakened on the battlefield, and its leadership was destroyed. With our support, Israel negotiated a ceasefire with them, and after that, Lebanon finally elected a new president who's not beholden to Hezbollah, and he can begin a new chapter for the Lebanese people. All told, these developments in the region, which the United States helped to shape, changed the equation. And so now, the terror network that once protected and sustained Hamas is far weaker. Iran is weaker. Iran is weaker than it's been in decades. Hezbollah is badly degraded. And after more than 15 months of war, Hamas's senior leaders are dead. Thousands of Hamas fighters are dead. And the military formations have been destroyed. with nowhere to turn, Hamas finally agreed to releasing hostages. You know, there was no other way for this war to end than with a hostage deal. And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war. The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed. In this deal, the people of Gaza can finally recover and rebuild. They can look to a future without Hamas in power. You know, the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. Many peacemakers helped make this deal happen, including an extraordinary team of American diplomats who have worked nonstop for months to get this done. Secretary Blinken led the effort. Secretary Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Bill Burns, John Feiner, Brett McGurk, Amos Hochstein, and the Vice President worked relentlessly as we work to deliver this deal. I'd also note this deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. This has been a time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's a genuine opportunities for a new future. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future, free from the grip of Hezbollah. In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. And for the Palestinian people, a credible pathway to a state of their own. And for the region, a future of normalization, integration of Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. At the G20 in Delhi in September 23, I rallied key countries behind a vision of an economic corridor from India across the Middle East to Europe. That vision can now become a reality. There are risks as well, including ISIS and Iran, even in a badly weakened state. But we're handing off then to the next team a real opportunity for a better future for the Middle East. I hope they will take it. Let me close with this. My friend for years in the United States Senate, former Senator George Mitchell, who did so much to forge peace in Northern Ireland, once said about diplomacy, he said, it is 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. Well, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began its terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks. We've not given up. And now, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived. God bless all the hostages and their families. May God protect the troops of all those who work for peace.
Well done, Joe Biden. I think it's 467 hostages. A couple of emails, Howard. This is from Chris. Blessings, Howard and Tim. Joe Biden could have had those hostages released a week after they were taken. All he needed to do was say to the leaders of Iran, I'm holding Iran directly accountable and responsible for the release of these hostages. If they're not released in 1 week, we, America, along with Israel, will launch an attack directly against Iran. And Iran will no longer be a threat to anyone in the Middle East. I guarantee that would get their attention. Cynthia writes, I know a lot of people don't like Biden, but as regards Hamas, I think he has stepped up and more as being going on behind the scenes than we give him credit for. Pity we don't have a government like them. My take is it's quite a good end to his presidency.
Well, yeah, he's trying to cash in on
Trump.
it, though. Well, really, he could have brought that all to a head a long time ago if he had the sort of foresight that Trump has, or even the courage that Trump had, because he just said it as it is, get it done before or hell will take loose. Yeah. I'll let loose. Yeah. Any more emails that you?
Yeah, we've got a lot of emails, but I thought maybe if we just sort of recap what is this peace deal, in case you haven't, if you only just tuned in. But
I mean, just first of all, the, the the families of the hostages, they must be so disappointed, because all the time this evening we were watching and watching and watching and thinking, well, yeah, okay, it's a deal's been done. Then you hear that it hasn't been done. It hasn't been fully agreed. That it's the corridor, you know, that is the problem.
Corridor.
Which is what Israel needs in order to protect itself. Otherwise, Hamas will just rearm themselves through the tunnels and through the corridor from Egypt, you know, into Gaza. So, yeah, it's a very difficult situation. But, you know, we all know the intent of Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and all the proxies, you know.
So it really is a very tentative, and they put it in different phases. So we have
we've got to get the hostages back.
Yeah,
got to get them back.
Totally. So this is what they're suggesting, if we put it up on the screen. Starting with phase 1 of the ceasefire, release of 33 hostages, and I think that's going to be over the next 6 weeks, and they're drip feeding them out, exactly the point you're making, Howard. I think only 3 are going to be released at the beginning. All women and children, men aged over 50. And then Gazans can go home to their wherever they've been displaced from. But the point is,
how many prisoners are going to get released?
They're going to get 2,000 overall. Can you believe it?
2,000 for 30.
But it's a better rate than we got with Gilad Shalit, because 1,000 were released, of whom were these terrorist leaders, for one. But anyway, that's phase 1, and then the second phase apparently is going to begin by the 16th day of phase 1, and it's release of all remaining hostages. Now, that is a key point, because how many are still alive? The BBC Verify is saying that maybe, I've got it written somewhere, that 94 hostages are still held in Gaza, 34 of them believed to be dead. So what we're saying is there's only 60 hostages still alive. And that was published by BBC Verify 1752. And BBC, by the way, Howard, they're actually quite good on getting information from within Gaza, because they've got insiders.
Well, of course.
Very close to the Hamas regime. But they were completely snubbed in Qatar. You watched the news conference, I watched it, and Sky News were the first ones to be asked to ask a question, then CNN, then Reuters, then Al Jazeera. So BBC is actually quite humiliating for them.
Yes, interesting. You know.
Yes, so that was phase 2.
Yeah,
and then phase 3. I don't know whether we got that, or no. There's a second part of phase 2. Is that right? Anyway, so a complete Israeli exit from Gaza. I'm sure Israel will be quite relieved actually to get out, because otherwise they're just sitting ducks for the Hamas guerrillas.
I think the thing is, it could have all been over if they'd just released the hostages straight away. You know, that would have been the end of the story. I'm pretty sure. But they've refused to do it all the way through. So cruel as well. So the way they were beating them up when they had them in the back of their truck.
Exactly.
The hostages, when they got them on October the 7th, 2023. You know, just beating them up, you know, with sticks.
Yeah, that should be the major story. Just finishing off second half of phase 2, which is Israel and Hamas to negotiate arrangements to end, have a permanent end to the war. The point about that is that how long is a piece of string? Because I can't see that happening. So therefore, what are they doing? They're trying to get a signal to Trump on the 19th, the day before he becomes president, to say, you know, we're really working hard, we're trying to get this to happen. And that's my explanation of what's happening.
Well, we've got the interview that was done just prior to going live, and Simon Barrett, Middle East correspondent for the Revelation TV, and Tim Vince, have a look at this and see what you make of it, and come back with your emails following this particular interview.
I'm joined now by our Middle East correspondent, Simon Barrett. And Simon, you have been living daily this terrible war in Gaza against Hamas. I don't even know the statistics of the number of days, but what's your first thoughts about this very imminent ceasefire between Israel and so-called ceasefire between Israel and so-called Hamas?
Well, I think there's two aspects to this. On the one hand, for any Israeli hostage to return home to their families, I'm delighted. And having interviewed last week on the Middle East Report, Danny, whose son Omri was kidnapped by Hamas on October the 7th, him telling his horrific story. My heart goes out to him and the rest of the hostages that they would come home safely. So firstly, I think we have to welcome the fact that any Israeli hostage that is actually returned in a ceasefire agreement has got to be welcomed. However, I do have some major concerns because what we don't want to happen and what the Israeli government has to decide very, very carefully now in terms of the future of Gaza is to ensure that Hamas don't rebuild, don't rearm, and we see another October the 7th scenario happening again in 10 or 15 years' time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great danger, but also the high cost that Israel is actually paying in releasing a number of Palestinian terrorists with Israeli blood on their hands. It's not going to be easy in either way.
Absolutely. It does show the high value of each Israeli hostage that, if I heard correctly earlier today, 30 for every male hostage, 30 Hamas folk terrorists will be released, and for every female 50 would be released. I may have misheard that, but the other thing in my mind, Simon, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is, are Hamas really going to be a major player going forwards? And is this really a deal with Hamas, given what Trump said in his second statement on Truth Social, that he's going to be working with allies to ensure that there would be no more haven for terrorists in Gaza?
I think you just have to see the facts on the ground. And those facts on the ground are that in the past month, according to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, headed up by Dori Gold, who was Benjamin Netanyahu's former ambassador to the UN, said that in the last month, Hamas has recruited 4,000 extra fighters stroke terrorists, and they have a fighting force of 20,000, and that Palestinian Islamic Jihad have 4,000. And now that Hamas are adopting a different tactics, more of a guerrilla-style tactics of hit and run, hitting Israeli soldiers, striking them, and then running, and then carrying out more attacks, which is a more asymmetrical warfare type of attack, which is much more difficult. But that also shows the strength that Israel and lengths Israel's gone to destroy the Hamas battalions over the past year. So the fact is, there's no doubt that Hamas's terrorist capabilities have been shot to bits. There's no doubt that the terror tunnels will be destroyed. Its ability to fire and launch rockets like it did on October the 7th are gone. I don't think Hamas is anywhere near capable of carrying anything out like October the 7th again. However, saying that, I think it's absolutely essential that Israel has security guarantees in place in the border between Egypt and Gaza, known as the Philadelphia Corridor, and sets up buffer zones within Gaza to ensure there isn't a resupply of weapons to Hamas of the sort that they used on October the 7th, the worst day in Israel's history.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we consider the approach of the Holocaust Memorial Day, it will be a wonderful thing for hostages to be released. In fact, for all those who are alive to be released. I wanted to ask about another comment Trump made today, and that is on the Abraham Accords, because it seems that will be the key for Israel and the region if Saudi Arabia are able to put pressure on Hamas and basically withdraw support for Hamas, in a wider peace initiative. And maybe that's what's putting also pressure on Israel, because Trump seems to be very keen on expanding the Abraham Accords.
Well, I think they're two separate things, Tim. Firstly, I don't think that the Saudis have much influence over Hamas. The main influential player in the Middle East is two nations, mostly Qataris, because that is the spiritual and political center of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas are the Egyptian offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, formed in Gaza in 1987. They are also backed up by a president of Turkey, a President Erdogan, who's also a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And so therefore, this is why the Americans are wanting to try and put pressure on the Qataris in order to release Hamas. The other fact is that about 30 of the Israeli hostages that are held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and their paymasters are the Iranian regime. So unless the Trump administration, when it comes in next Monday, can put huge pressure on Iran, then this is going to be the most difficult aspect of the negotiations to bring those remaining 30 Israeli hostages home. In terms of the Abraham Accords, it could be troubling for Israel because, there's a lot of calls for a Palestinian state. And there is no doubt that the Saudis will want to now pursue a peace treaty with Israel. And the danger comes is if they start demanding a Palestinian state and Trump will say, look, I helped to deliver the hostages. I've helped you to restore your deterrent capabilities in the Middle East. And I've got your back. And if you then want me to give you backing or a green light to attack Iran's nuclear facilities to prevent Iran from having nuclear breakout, nuclear weapons, then in return, I want a Palestinian state. I mean, Trump's whole approach to the Middle East and to world affairs will be, I'm a businessman at heart. I want America to be rich. I want America's GDP to go up. And I want less wars because they cost money. So you can start to see that influence going. And also within the Trump administration, which is a bit troubling, I think, is a move towards isolationists and some really anti-Israel influences within his administration.
Very interesting. Very, very good answer that was. Now, something that I'm sure many of the viewers will be perplexed about is why on earth is Israel being forced into a deal, let's put it that way round, or even acceding to a deal that, on the reports I've heard, would mean 2,000, convicted terrorists and criminals being released back into Gaza, considering, who was among the 1,000 that were released when Gilad Shalit found his freedom. The odds are looking a little better in that Israel is getting more than one hostage release, but it just seems complete madness to release these characters unless they're tagged and targeted if indeed they misbehave.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking, it's sickening. But again, I think we have to realize that the pressure that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on from the Israeli public to bring the hostages home. Their number one priority is the welfare and the return of the hostages, number one. That supersedes Israel's military, not only capabilities, but also that supersedes Israel's desire to destroy Hamas or they have done Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So that's the main priority. But also, I think you have to understand Middle East culture. You have to understand Arabic culture. And part of that culture is an honor culture. So therefore, Hamas will need to say that they have a victory, that they've managed to achieve a ceasefire. They've been able to achieve an Israeli withdrawal from the main population areas in Gaza and to have some of their terrorists actually return home to them so that they can say, look, we've done this. This is the victory that we've got. Because
it's ironic. I don't know whether you saw the irony, Simon, on the streets of Gaza. And as you've just mentioned, they want to claim victory. They're celebrating a victory when only a few days ago they were saying that a genocide was being committed. So there's some disconnect there. But I wanted to ask, finally, about the future of Netanyahu. with the threats of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, as it were, threatening to resign from the cabinet. And could this be, the sign that Netanyahu is going to retire from his position as Prime Minister?
I mean, that's a good question. Look, I'm no fan of Itamar Ben-Gvir or Smotrich, the finance minister. I mean, these are extreme individuals. They are extreme religious right individuals. Ben-Gvir, for example, he wasn't even allowed to be enlisted into the IDF because they feared that you gave him a gun, they couldn't control him. So he was never, ever allowed to actually become a member of the Israeli Defense Force. But he is now Israel's security minister. And I think they've also got to think as well, but if they resign from the government over this potential ceasefire agreement, then who are they going to end up in coalition with in the future? Who is going to give them the positions that they have right now? And of course, the security minister is a top job in the Israeli cabinet. So is the finance job. So where are they going to go? And their only future and hope lies with Benjamin Netanyahu if they value their ministerial portfolio. Having said that, if this war comes to an end very quickly and we see a permanent ceasefire done, then there'll be a public inquiry in Israel over what happened on October the 7th, just as that happened with Golda Meir after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And the political pressure then placed on Netanyahu will be absolutely immense. So for his long-term political survival, and he is a survivalist, will actually then really kind of depend on his close relationship with Trump. And the two fell out after Trump lost the US presidential election. Some allege that he was denied the US presidential election in 2020. I'll let you make up your own minds what you believe on that one. But essentially, Donald Trump was angry at Benjamin Netanyahu for not endorsing his presidency, which he couldn't do as prime minister. He could not endorse Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump had been Israel's best friend they've ever had in the White House, because if he lost the election, which he did, then the Democrats would come in and you are threatening Israel's national security interests by playing the partisan card. So if when Trump comes in next week, he gives Israel the green light to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, then, of course, I think expect him to stay a lot longer. But as things calm down, as the situation then stables in the Middle East, things return a little bit back to normal. And once there's a public inquiry into the handling of the of October the 7th and what the Israeli government prime minister knew at the time. Why did it take almost 7 or 8 hours to the IDF to actually get down to the south, to those beleaguered communities that are attacked by Hamas? Why did this happen? And those important questions, when they're answered, could lead to the downfall of the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And I don't think there'll be a way back for him. But what he's done in office ever since October the 7th and his way he's responded to this one has been absolutely exceptional. The guy's a visionary. He understands the region, but at the same time, he's very difficult to work with.
Thank you, Simon. Simon, that I've been listening, as I'm sure you have, through the afternoon to all the various media outlets, and I can say with complete impartiality, what you've just given in those answers is far superior to anything I heard from all of the other so-called, mainstream channels. So as people say, why go to the monkeys when you can go to the organ grinder? And it's a privilege, Simon, to have you as our Middle East correspondent. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you to our viewers, and thank you for their wonderful support of Israel and the Jewish people at this critical time. So let's please pray that all the hostages would return home to their loved ones.
That was really good, brilliant answers from Simon. And as you know, you can tune into the Middle East Report and get all the details, and some of it very, very moving. I'll read some of your emails. By the way, Howard has been called away, so don't don't touch that dial, as they say. Let's just go through some of your emails and we'll recap also what the peace deal is. Stavina writes, I pray all the hostages get released, as I've been to many meetings and heard the testimonies of families of loved ones who died or were taken hostage on October the 7th. I cannot believe the ratio of the number of convicted terrorists being released in exchange. I hope the world wakes up to the injustices that has happened to Israel. Thanks for that one. There's different ones coming in. Dear brothers, this is from Paul and Ruth. This is a war. This war is against the invisible powers and dark forces that wage war against the principles of peace. The battle is a spiritual one. Biden only sees a physical one, which has no real resolve. It will only result in the building of more resolve to attack Israel again later. This is not the end of the war, only another delay to deal with the real problem. It is Hamas and their ideology. We can only pray to our Almighty God that whatever happens, it will be God's will. As Biden said, blessed are the peacemakers. I thought that was very good when Biden said that. Denise says, God clearly states you either stand with Israel or you stand against Israel. We're told to stand with Israel. It's not a suggestion. I stand with Israel, as does Revelation TV. I'll read some more of your emails, but let's just recap on what is this ceasefire deal. Phase 1, as we've mentioned, is release of 33 hostages, all women and children aged and men aged over 50, and the Gazans can go home. Bear in mind about 1.5 million Gazans have been internally displaced. Ceasefire Phase 2, release of all remaining hostages. There's an estimate that maybe there's a total of 60, so there would only be another 27 released. And a permanent truce. And the other aspect of Phase 2 is a complete Israeli exit from Gaza and Israel and Hamas to negotiate arrangements on a permanent end to the war. The point about that is that that has not been finalised and the negotiations will be ongoing. So Phase 1 is the only part that's been agreed, and then Phase 3 is the sad return of all remaining bodies of those that have died and the reconstruction of Gaza. Now that's not going to happen overnight, and as I said before, you know, there are 90, according to BBC Verify, there are 94 of the 251 hostages taken on 7th of October who are still held in Gaza, and 60 are assumed to be living, and 34 sadly have died, and we can see up there on the screen those who are still in captivity. The figure of 34 hostages taken on 7th of October and now thought dead is based on announcements by the IDF after investigations and statements from kibbutzim and organizations representing the families. 109 hostages have been released through negotiations, either on humanitarian grounds or during the temporary ceasefire from the 24th to the 30th of October. And 8 hostages have been rescued by the IDF. The remains of 40 hostages have been recovered from Gaza by the IDF. This includes 3 hostages accidentally killed by the IDF on the 15th of December. So, yeah, it's a really tragic story. Also, it's worth just recapping what did the Qatar Prime Minister say in his conference piece, in his announcement of the ceasefire and the peace deal. He said it will take effect on the 19th of January, that's this coming Sunday. Joint efforts with Egypt and the US, he's crediting, ensured all sides will follow through with their commitments. Now, he was asked actually, was it Donald Trump who put pressure on the whole event? And he, to be fair, he credited Donald Trump's negotiator first, but also acknowledged the role of the Biden team. But I'm going to read what Trump wrote, because you know, again, you get more from the horse's mouth sometimes. This epic ceasefire, Trump wrote on his Truth Social, could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I'm thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returned home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist-safe haven. That was one of the questions I put to Simon earlier. We'll continue to promote peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of this ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of great things to come for America and indeed the world. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed so that they can secure more victories for the United States. That was Donald Trump earlier. No question, if you show strength and frankly the threats that Trump issued to Hamas and effectively to Qatar as well were pretty significant and substantial, and begrudgingly even the BBC and other mainstream channels said this wouldn't have happened without the pressure from the Donald. And the Trump has sounded, that's what I would say. Susan writes, the video you showed, now this was the one where the social media influencer was interviewing a lady from Gaza who was currently in Egypt. This is what Susan writes. The video you showed was so revealing. In light of that and the hate-filled views of this woman concerned, what is your view on Genesis 16:12 regarding Ishmael? And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. It doesn't augur well, and it's almost become an inbred hatred that they have for the Jewish people from generation to generation. Maybe Israel needs to just build a huge wall across Gaza and create a huge chasm so they can't build any future tunnels. It's good that an agreement has been reached, but as always, Israel is forced to pay more than the so-called Palestinians. It is always unfair, but they value life and they so long for peace, it is understandable. Yeah, something I always mention to my kids growing up, it's just a little warning which I think applies to all of us, and that is that jealousy breeds hatred and hatred breeds killing. And it applies across the world, and certainly in this situation. And there was right at the beginning this jealousy of Ishmael towards his brother Isaac, through whom the promise of the Messiah was given, and the promise of Abraham through Isaac, through Jacob, to be a blessing to the whole world. And that sadly has generated jealousy, envy, which has led to the hatred that we have today. So there are really deep issues, and it's not just a 100-year-old conflict, it's much deeper than that. Phyllis writes, I'm very pleased to hear of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. I hope all the hostages will be returned safely to their families. I think Mr. Joe Biden did a lot to bring about this ceasefire. Mr. Biden is a good man with a heart for peace and reconciliation. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of Mr. Netanyahu, whose legacy will be the deaths, itchy nose, the deaths of 40,000 children from Gaza. This ceasefire only comes into effect on Sunday next. What happens for the next 3 days? Does the killing continue? May God bless the Israeli people and also the Palestinian people who've suffered so much. Thanks for that, Phyllis. And also this is from Kathleen, just in from Bible study again, no mention of Israel or hostages. Anyway, I pray for all hostages and their families. Don't know the politics of Israel, but Benjamin Netanyahu has been very strong. That's an alternative view, Phyllis, through this. God bless Israel. Yeah, I think that there was basically, once October the 7th happened, there was no alternative for Israel. There are a lot of questions, as Simon has said, that need to be answered regarding how October the 7th happened. But after it happened, Netanyahu had to act, and all of Israel has pretty well been behind him on that. How about a statement from our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer? He said, after months of devastating bloodshed and countless lives lost, this is the long overdue news that the Israeli and Palestinian people have been desperately waiting for. They have borne the brunt of this conflict, triggered by the brutal terrorists of Hamas, who committed the deadliest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust on October the 7th, 2023. The hostages, who were brutally ripped from their homes on that day and held captive in unimaginable conditions ever since, can now finally return to their families. But we should also use this moment to pay tribute to those who won't make it home, including the British people who were murdered by Hamas. We will continue to mourn and remember them. For the innocent Palestinians whose homes turned into a war zone overnight, and the many who have lost their lives, this ceasefire must allow for a huge surge in humanitarian aid. By the way, part of the ceasefire is 600 trucks per day. That's quite a tall order. But just carrying on the statement. This aid is so desperately needed to end the suffering in Gaza, and then our attention must turn to how we secure a permanently better future for the Israeli and Palestinian people, grounded in a two-state solution that will guarantee security and stability for Israel, alongside a sovereign and viable Palestinian state. The UK and its allies will continue to be at the forefront of these crucial efforts to break the cycle of violence and secure long-term peace in the Middle East. Many commentators would say, Sir Keir Starmer, that it's this obsession with the two-state solution which has led to so much suffering. And as Israelis I met in Hebron many years ago said, we had peace here before the United Nations brought their peace. And there's a peace that the world cannot give, as the Lord said. He said, peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. It's a peace that the world cannot understand. And I think that is the peacemaking that we're really praying for. It's nice that Biden quoted the Bible, the New Testament, the words of our Lord Jesus. And thank you all for being part of this program. As Stevina said, God bless and shalom. And we do pray for shalom in the hearts of all the people of Israel, and also peace with God. Thank you so much for joining Howard and me in this program.